couple of years ago, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz went on a visit to Japan. For this, he was forced to fly around Russia on a long and complicated route by the North Pole. He spent a full 24 hours in the air. After that, rumors started circulating on the internet that Scholz had received a dangerous dose of radiation. Being up in the sky is especially dangerous during the northern lights, which occur due to solar flares. That's exactly why Western airlines strictly monitor things so that pilots don't make transarctic flights more than 3 times a year. Probably, during Scholz's flight, the sensors picked up some kind of anomalous radiation level. Otherwise, why would the experts get so alarmed? In reality, lately some kind of devilry has been happening around our planet. During Catholic Easter, a powerful flare happened on the sun, because of which radio communications stopped working. And in June, people on Earth observed a parade of planets. Lined up in one row were Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, Mars, Neptune, and Uranus. In addition, astronomers were surprised by the annual Lyrids meteor shower. Scientists from the University of California in Los Angeles discovered a cosmic rain that consists of superfast electrons. They fly to Earth like drops from the depths of the universe and create the most beautiful northern lights. But such a rain is incredibly dangerous. It can disable spacecraft. But the strangest thing is that the Voyager 1 spacecraft is sending some kind of gibberish from deep space. It was launched in 1977 and has long since left the solar system. NASA reports, it creates the impression that the data is being generated randomly and does not reflect the state in which the device might actually be. It's strange that it didn't activate the safety systems that are designed to switch the ship into safe mode when an anomaly occurs. It seems like Voyager 1 has simply been captured by someone. The Voyager 1 project, just like the Voyager 2 project, has already been in existence for 45 years. Their service life was originally planned to be around 20 years. That means for the last 25 years they have somehow, thanks to their plutonium generator, still been existing and functioning at full capacity. The engineers never counted on such miracles. Since the probe continues to work, they decided they absolutely had to take advantage of it. And they began uploading new software to it, setting new goals, and sending it even further. Right now, Voyager is at a distance of roughly 14.3 billion miles from Earth. A distance like that, if you launched a human into space, most likely they wouldn't live to see the end of the mission. According to experts, there could be several reasons why Voyager 1 is sending back confusing data to Earth. First of all, its age is taking its toll. At the time of its launch in 1977, the technology was nowhere near as advanced as it is today. Secondly, the gigantic distance separating the probe from our planet affects data transmission. The signal takes more than a day to arrive. And to receive a photo weighing just 175 kilobits, it sometimes takes several weeks. Plus, there's a 2-day signal delay. But there's also a third version. In the depths of space, Voyager 1 encountered something unknown, something that astrophysicists have not yet studied. It is the first spacecraft in the history of humanity that has left the solar system and is now in interstellar space. There is completely different cosmic radiation there. Completely different laws are at work that we don't fully understand. Anything could be there. It could be picking up signals from any quasar, from any black hole. It's mind-boggling, but Voyager could far outlive its creators. Complex mathematics suggests that Voyager 1, like its brother Voyager 2, will continue to exist for at least 10 million years. They will fly and rotate around the center of the galaxy. But perhaps astrophysicists should take more seriously those incomprehensible data that the probe is sending back to its home planet. What if it's a warning that something unusual is happening in the universe? NASA scientists are completely baffled. The Hubble Space Telescope has recently been sending them data that refutes all previous knowledge about the universe. It turns out it's expanding much faster than previously assumed. And this is contrary to all the laws of physics and mathematics. NASA was forced to admit that modern science is unable to explain this paradox. The latest Hubble measurements showed that in the space surrounding us, the expansion speed is one value, but the farther we get toward the edge of the universe, the more it increases. That shouldn't be the case, because the speed should be the same throughout space, since the universe is homogeneous. And there are no explanations for this yet. Astrophysicists suggest that the cause is dark energy, a mysterious substance that pushes galaxies apart, forcing them to move away from each other. Scientists have no idea what it is, which means our science is at the very initial stage of understanding the cosmos. So what does the expansion of the universe threaten our planet with? Will Earth really be torn apart? Calm down, just calm down. It turns out that the forces of gravity will not allow the Earth itself to expand. While it's expanding, stars are simply moving away from each other. But complete loneliness in the universe is guaranteed for us. Just imagine, you decide to admire the night sky, and there's nothing there, emptiness. There won't be a single nearby star. But the worst thing is if we lose the sun. If the forces of gravity can't hold it in our system, then Earthlings will be left without the protection of a star in the dark expanses of space. Lately, astronomers are finding more and more so-called rogue planets. They don't have their own star, and they constantly wander through the universe. And there are a lot of such objects. For some reason, rogue planets have left the gravitational field of their star, essentially escaping from it. So maybe they are victims of the universe's expansion? Could the same fate befall Earth? Will life be preserved on our planet after that? And in what form? That's a big question. It's unlikely that living beings and plants could survive without sunlight. But there is good news. Most likely, the moon won't leave us under any circumstances. At least, that's what astrophysicists' modeling of this situation has shown. There is another scenario for the further development of the universe. At some point, the expansion will reach its limit, and the reverse process will begin, the Big Crunch. And that would be a real apocalypse. There is also a third model of the universe's existence. It pulsates, it contracts, and then expands. And this version seems very curious from the point of view of how pulsation affects our planet. Perhaps this explains the increased radiation, the cosmic rains of electrons, various natural disasters, and something else completely inexplicable. In 2022, a real wave of news related to UFOs hit us. The U.S. authorities introduced an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. Thanks to it, UFO whistleblowers will be reliably protected. The thing is, many eyewitnesses prefer not to report encounters with flying saucers, fearing that they'll be considered crazy and fired from their jobs. The new amendment prohibits taking such measures against informants. But why? Do the Americans have some kind of secret data about an impending invasion? On May 18, 2022, the American military demonstrated video of this unidentified flying object to Congress, after which the congressman launched a heated discussion. Interestingly, according to the latest polls, 62% of Americans believe in aliens. At the same time, 79% believe that the authorities are hiding this information from the public. The British aren't far behind them. Among them, 20% believe in saucers. About a third are sure they've seen a UFO with their own eyes. And 58% even reported it to the police. British millionaire William Shawcross even bought a plot of the former Royal Air Force Base in the UK to search for UFOs. For this, he plans to use a radar installation that monitored nuclear missiles during the Cold War. And this video was made by residents of the Mexican city of Tijuana. The same surge of ufological hysteria is happening in Japan. In 2021, an international UFO laboratory was opened in Fukushima, essentially an official scientific research institute for flying saucers. ufologists suggest that the intentions of the visitors could be the kindest. They are very worried about humanity. That's why they appear where there has been an accident at a nuclear reactor. According to another version, UFOs are simply attracted to places of energy concentration, volcanoes, nuclear power plants, gas craters, which means their methods of extracting and using this energy could differ significantly from our human ones. And yet, why has interest in aliens resumed at the highest level? And why aren't the US congressmen afraid of being labeled crazy? Judging by their tense faces without a hint of a smile, the American legislators are seriously alarmed. And this is only the small part that they decided to demonstrate openly to the public. It's hard to even imagine what questions were discussed at their closed sessions. The mass collection of data on aircraft with incomprehensible characteristics is needed by various countries to secure their airspace. However, there is another version. The UFO invasion is the next move by the secret world government to create chaos. The pandemic they orchestrated, the provoked conflict in Ukraine, the threat of famine have already sown panic. People are unable to assess the situation soberly and are ready to believe anything. The goal of the reports about flying saucers is the same as with the pandemic: to scare people so they are easier to control. This is exactly what the governments of the USA, Great Britain, and Japan are doing now. Just like with medical masks, just like with arms supplies, you can make good money on mass panic from an alien invasion. But what if UFOs really are ships from another world? Let's consider this version in more detail. Why such a surge in appearances of flying saucers? And is there some kind of pattern in this? In the American state of Idaho, ecologists discovered a large deer cemetery. The animals died simultaneously. Something with great force crushed their bones. Ecologists suggested that the deer for some reason climbed into a narrow passage between the mountains and were covered by a rock avalanche. But this is not the only case of mass animal deaths. Look at this giant cemetery of domestic animals. The video was shot in the American state of Kansas. Literally, in one moment, about 10,000 cows died there for unknown reasons. According to the official version, the animals were killed by anomalous heat, over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. However, many Americans believe that the authorities are pulling the wool over their eyes. Indeed, can you imagine that sunstroke hit all the cows at the same time? However, many American commentators on the video recalled that a similar situation with mass livestock deaths happened in the 1960s. And by the way, it also started in Kansas. And then it spread to other American states. American farmers had been reporting mutilated cattle carcasses for a long time. But at first the authorities didn't pay attention to it. They attributed the deaths of animals to lightning strikes or predator attacks. But in the 1960s, these reports became massive. The first case that thundered across America was the death of a horse near the city of Alamosa in 1967. It was found by farmer Agnes King and her son. Part of the animal's skin was cut off with surgical precision. There was a smell of some chemical substances around, like in a hospital. On the horse's body, there was a greenish slime that burned the woman's hand when she tried to touch it. The animal was completely drained of blood, yet there were no traces of blood around. A Geiger counter showed an elevated radioactive background. Such cases became more and more across America. In Colorado alone, about 130, since strange flashes and flying objects were observed near the sites of the killings. A version about UFO involvement appeared. In 1975, the FBI opened an official investigation. The case seemed completely inexplicable. Carcasses of some animals were found hanging on trees or fences, as if they had been dropped from above. Laboratory analysis showed changes in the chemical composition of their tissues. All cases were carefully documented, but the FBI agents were never able to come to any definite conclusion. Many researchers believe that there is a lot in common between these cases and the death of the Dyatlov hiking group in Russia. You know, That mysterious incident in the Ural Mountains where 9 hikers died under strange circumstances. For example, the missing tongue, eyes, and severe fractures in some members of the group. Let us recall that in terms of timing, everything coincides. The tourists died in 1959, shortly before the start of similar events in the USA. And a little later, people all over the world began to massively report the appearance of crop circles. But crop circles still remain a big question, very poorly studied and unexplained. There were copycats, people who tried to recreate these circles, but nevertheless there are known cases that are impossible to explain. This is still a mystery. In 1959, information appeared in Polish newspapers about a UFO crash near the city of Gdynia. In a series of publications, journalists claimed that a wounded creature was found on the shore of the bay, only remotely resembling a human. On the humanoid's hand, there was supposedly a bracelet that apparently supported its life functions. When it was removed, the alien's condition worsened and he died. However, Polish ufologists do not rule out that the alien's body may still be stored in one of the morgues in Gdynia. So, what was happening on our planet in the 1960s? Did this alien hysteria have any real basis? Approximately in the same period, the first reports from people about being abducted by aliens begin to appear. Some of them even remembered details of the experiments that the humanoids performed on them. Of course, among the imaginary victims of humanoids, there were many mentally unstable people. After watching too much TV, they began to believe that UFOs were hunting them personally. Many of such people were simply trying to attract attention to themselves. However, there are cases that are difficult to explain by a thirst for fame or wild imagination. In 1957, Brazilian farmer Antonio Villas-Boas was driving a tractor across a field at night. Suddenly, a bright star appeared in the sky, which approached and turned out to be an egg-shaped object on 3 tripod stands. 3 humanoids jumped out from there and dragged the man inside. What happened next, he remembered very well. And in very piquant details, because a humanoid appeared before him in the form of a naked woman with romantic sexual consequences. Of course, this story sounds like nonsense, if not for a few details. First, Antonio didn't tell anyone about what happened, except his mother. Secondly, soon he felt a headache, nausea, pain in the eyes. Sores appeared on the skin. Doctors decided that these were symptoms of radiation sickness. Only then did Antonio tell them about the incident. The doctors came to the conclusion that he was behaving quite reasonably and naturally for a person who found himself in a wild situation. But if we assume that aliens really visited us, then why did such an influx happen specifically in the 1960s? The ufological theory states that aliens are interested in important historical milestones in the life of humanity, and humanity's entry into space is undoubtedly one of such milestones. If we imagine that some highly developed civilization is watching us and our development, and it discovers that these tiny humanoids have sent one of their own into space, this will undoubtedly cause their interest and desire to observe what is happening and what threat it might pose to space in the universe. However, there is another explanation. At the beginning of the film, we talked about 3 scenarios for the development of the universe. It expands endlessly, contracts to a critical point, or pulsates like a heart at a certain frequency. Recently, astrophysicists have recorded that the universe is expanding at an unexpectedly high speed. But what if this is an error in the calculations? The confusion may be due to dark energy. Its composition and nature are unknown to scientists. Astrophysicists began to suspect the existence of dark energy when they discovered that the movement of some stars and galaxies deviates from celestial mechanics for incomprehensible reasons. If because of the unpredictability of dark energy the universe began to contract, then visits by alien guests to Earth become quite explainable. When the universe contracts, according to this theory, cosmic objects approach each other as much as possible, which gives alien civilizations the opportunity to overcome spaces that would previously have taken billions of light years. But perhaps the universe is not contracting so literally, otherwise astrophysicists would have noticed it. It's just that under the influence of dark energy, individual sections become closer to Earth. When the matter of the universe changes, so-called wormholes can form, and if we learn to stabilize them, then the transition from Earth to the Moon would take less than a second. A wormhole is a tunnel in space that connects its separate sections. Imagine that the universe is a sheet of paper. A point on one side of the sheet is Earth, and on the other side is an alien planet. While the sheet is in an unfolded state, these points are far from each other. But if you bend it, they will be very close. If we imagine that there are other civilizations that have reached a much higher level of technological development and for whom the instability of wormholes is not scary, then they can quite use them. Perhaps wormholes form in space at certain intervals, for example, every 60 years. In this case, it is clear why we are now observing the same events as in the 1960s. Interestingly, in June, a news about an alien signal was published on the website of the Ministry of Science and Technology of China. It was allegedly caught by the huge Chinese telescope Sky Eye, but soon the news was deleted without explanation. The hypothesis about the appearance of UFOs through wormholes every 60 to 100 years is confirmed by numerous historical evidence. Incredibly, UFOs have been visiting us since ancient times. For example, the first reports of strange circles in the fields appeared in 1678. This was reflected in the old British brochure, The Mowing Devil. An English farmer from Hertfordshire was greedy and refused to pay the mower's money. Instead, he entrusted the work to the devil. All night the field was blazing with flame, and in the morning the peasants saw that it was mowed perfectly, as no person could have done. Look at this painting called The Annunciation with Saint Emilius. It was painted by the Italian painter Carlo Crivelli in 1486. It is now in the National Gallery in London. Does the object in the upper left corner remind you of anything? And here's an even earlier painting, The Crucifixion of Christ from 1350. It is located in the Serbian monastery of Visoki Dikani in Kosovo. In the sky, two flying ships with passengers are depicted. And this is a painting by the Dutchman Arend de Gelder, The Ascension of Christ from 1710. According to the artist's interpretation, a flying saucer took Jesus to heaven. But most likely, the painters still saw similar objects in the sky or heard from eyewitnesses and could well take it for some divine phenomenon. As we have already said, according to one theory, the universe pulsates. It contracts, then expands. This happens very slowly by human standards. But the moment of the next push from expansion to contraction can very seriously affect our planet. The influence of space on people's behavior was written about by the Soviet biophysicist Alexander Chizevsky in his book, The Terrestrial Echo of Solar Storms. He established that during solar flares on Earth, epidemics, wars, natural disasters occur, and the sun, in turn, is influenced by the general processes of the universe. On October 24th, 1960, a catastrophe occurred at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. During the preparation for the first test launch of the R-16 intercontinental ballistic missile, the rocket fuel caught fire. According to various data, from 74 to 126 people died. Among them was the commander-in-chief of the rocket troops. In China at this time, the Great Famine was raging, which claimed the lives of 55 million people. A terrible earthquake occurred on February 29, 1960 in Morocco, near the city of Agadir. 15,000 people died, 12,000 were injured, and 35,000 were left homeless. In a word, our planet was shaking to the fullest, just like now. Interestingly, it is during such periods that many people with unusual and even supernatural abilities appear. Someone sees the future. Someone began to heal with hands. If we take the 40s, 60s years, a very psychic Wolf Messing appeared, who could read thoughts and transmit this information. He was one on the whole planet. Now we have a lot of such professionals. If this is really the case, then we can only hope for these superheroes. People who will cure us of viruses, protect us from bombings, pull us out of a burning house, and save us from tsunamis. After all, while the pulse of the universe is uneven, anything is possible.